Hey everyone, and welcome back to All Things True Crime. My name is Bridget, and today is the final episode of the series on Missy Lemerond Gray. Before we get into the video, I'd love it if you would subscribe to the channel. Over 90% of my audience isn't subscribed. By subscribing, you're telling YouTube that this is the type of content that interests you, and it helps my channel out. If you haven't seen the first 3 videos on this case, I would recommend watching those first, especially episode 1. The links will be in the description of this video. You will now hear from Missy's sister Shelly. She speaks about Missy's death, as well as the impact her father's murder had on her. You are Missy's sister.
Yes.
Is there anything about your childhood that you want to talk about?
I think we had a good childhood. It was me, my brother, and my sister. We all have the same mom, same dad. We went to my dad's every other weekend. We're still all pretty close because we're all less than I'm like a year apart, and then they're less than a year apart. I think we had a good childhood. We used to go to my dad's. We'd go thrift shopping. We'd go sledding with my dad. We'd play board games. We'd do puzzles.
So sorry about what happened to your dad. How old were you when that happened?
I was 13.
13.
Probably 12, turning 13.
I'm so sorry. Do you think that obviously that had a huge impact on your family?
Yeah. Yes, it did.
How do you think that what happened with your dad impacted Missy?
Probably it didn't need, I think she ran away to school right away. After high school, she signed up for college and she ran out of Green Bay immediately. And then she kind of stayed away. Right after high school, she went to college out of Green Bay, and then she stayed away for years. And that was probably her coping mechanism of keeping busy, because once I got old enough and had a job, I just kept working, because that was the only way I could not think about my dad being dead, was to keep working. So I assume that's what she did with school.
Do you remember when they met or when they started dating? Do you remember meeting him and how you felt about him?
I remember meeting him as when I was way younger. And then I remember Missy being like, oh, this is who I'm dating. And then I remember I was working at a bar up north, and it was a big ordeal. My mom's like, Missy's getting married, but they're not they're just getting married at the courthouse. They're not having a huge wedding. In 5 years, they'll come back when they graduate and they'll do it. And I remember Missy being at college, and Walter saying, I'm going to go to that college. And then he went to the same college as Missy, and then all of a sudden they were getting married. I remember working at a bar. Missy came back for a week or so, and she was saying, oh, she was getting married. She was pregnant. My mom knew she was pregnant, and she wouldn't tell anyone. So I remember all that. But I do remember, being a kid, meeting Walter, I guess. I didn't really have any feelings towards him. I didn't like him, dislike him. I just remember key points of her life. I remember when she was in college by herself. I remember when Walter went to college. I remember when she came back and said she was getting married. And then I remember when she finally admitted that she was pregnant, and my mom's like, oh, she's been pregnant all along.
Do you think that she got married because she was pregnant?
I feel like that's what she wanted to do. That's what pushed her to get pregnant. Or that's what pushed her to get married.
Yeah.
Because she wanted, she didn't want to be anything like we were raised. Because she used to tell me that all the time. I can't do that because that's how we were raised, Shelly. And she just wanted absolutely nothing like we were raised.
Did you see any signs of domestic violence before she admitted that that's what was going on?
I don't think she ever admitted it to me. It bothers me because Missy was my go-to person. And then she was so persistent on stay away from that I would have never, assumed that my sister would have let herself do something like that, be involved in something like that. So the first time I would have ever seen that happening is when she was in Wausau. And that's when I knew Missy, there's something wrong with my sister, because she was so happy I moved there. She's like, it's so nice to have somebody to talk to again. I haven't been around family in years, blah, 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 because she was living in different states, and now she just got back to Wausau. But in Wausau is when I knew something happened to Missy, because I was at house, and Missy comes knocking on the door. Missy came knocking on the door saying she was crying when I opened the door. She said Walter dropped her off and took her kids, and she wasn't allowed to go home. And that's when I knew something was wrong. So that was only like 2 years ago.
That would be probably around the time that she found out as well. Sounds like maybe he was escalating a little bit, and so she felt like she wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, so then I would say stuff like she would cry to me and say Walter wants to divorce her, and then she got her. They were living in these nice little apartments, and there was like a whole street of all these apartments, and then they were living all together, and Walter had like the 2-bedroom apartment, and they had the kids had all the toys in the living room. Missy had the bedroom, like, and her and the kids slept in there, and Walter had the other room as his office for his wedding films. And it was just a really weird setup. So when I go there, I knew something was weird. I'm like, because for a while her king size bed was in the living room, and I'm like, what is going on, Missy? Why is your bed in the living room? And she's like, oh, it just works better for us. She was real good at smoothing stuff over. And again, like, she was the strongest person of my life. So I would have never assumed she would let herself go through that.
Did she ever talk to you about it being physical, or was it more like psychological coercive control?
No, she never ever told me that Walter hit her. She made it seem like she would ask me, like, if you're not busy today, could you come over? Because there's a time she's like, we're getting a divorce, and then they're gonna get a divorce, and they want to keep it as cordial as they can for their kids. So Walter's gonna move down the road in the next apartments, which is the same landlord, same kind of apartment, just down the road, like literally 100 steps, which is really weird and unhealthy. And he's going to live there, and they're going to pass kids back and forth. Then Missy started working. I convinced her to work at a group home with me, which was 2 days a week, 24-hour shifts. She liked it at first, but then she's never taken care of like disabled people. So that might have been mentally too much for her. But I know that Walter made her quit that job, because she'd literally be like, all the time when I'd work side by side with her on a different house, and she'd be like, Walter can't handle the kids. I have to go home. So that's what made her quit that job. I know it is, because she was happy. So that's when she started buying her kids bunk beds with the slides. She started decorating the room as space. Like, she started buying all new house stuff. And that was all with when she started working. Like, she was happy working. And then she quit her job. And then Walter moved down the road. And then they passed the kids back and forth for a while. And then they were going to get back together, and Walter moved back in. And Missy never said that he physically hit her. She would never say that to me. I just knew it was happening.
Did she mention anything about, well, obviously coercive control, he didn't want her to work. Did she mention anything about him choosing her clothes, being in charge of the money, telling her who she can and can't talk to, being around family and friends? Did she say anything about any of that?
I know that she was always on her phone every time I was with her. She's texting like every 2 minutes, and she hated people. Like, as a high school, she had all the friends in the world. But then when she got older and had kids, she's like, I would never hang out with them, Shelly. So I know she's not on the phone talking to her friends. She had to have been talking to them like every 2 minutes. I wouldn't know. She didn't. She'd just be like, every decision she'd make, she'd be like, oh, I have to ask Walter. Oh, I have to ask Walter. And I just assume that's because she's married, but she made it seem like they had like the perfect life ever. That's why I'm so mad at myself about it.
I think from talking to your mum as well, it sounds like she was protecting you guys, because I think she knows that if you both knew, because you're such strong women, that you would probably do something about it. I think that that's why she didn't tell you.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't sound like she confided in anyone at all about it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think she was like, well, she's an advocate for like all people. So she's like, LBGT right community, like she's all for that, equal rights. And she was like for everybody else. And I think maybe she was embarrassed to say that she was actually going through what she fought like so hard to help everybody else get out of.
I think as well with coercive control, he could have been telling her that no one would believe her, because from the outside it did look perfect, and so he probably could have been sort of brainwashing her to think that no one would believe her, so there's no point in telling her. telling
Yeah, based
people
off
about it.
his suicide murder note, that's what it sounded like. He's like, oh, you thought when he's taunting and laughing at her after she's already dead because I don't know if my mom told you, but it's obvious. I mean, nobody told me, but 1 + 1 is 2, and it's obvious that he made that post and then he scheduled Facebook to post it after he already killed her and himself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because everyone commenting, "Oh, don't do it, Walter, don't go there. Are you okay?" Blah blah blah. But that was already after they were dead that that post had hit Facebook. So he had scheduled it to hit Facebook after, and he had like I don't know if you read that specific post, but he's taunting Missy about you didn't win the restraining order. Oh, you thought you could get the courts to believe you with this one, and he's pretty much laughing at it.
But that would be interesting to know whether he did schedule that or not. That's a really good point.
Yeah. In my brain, it goes to it had to have been scheduled. I don't think he could have got through with all the millions of people he knows on the internet. Somebody he knew would have said something.
Well, that actually makes a lot of sense because now that I think about it, it was all premeditated. I know that from everything I've seen. But I remember reading that when after it happened, when Emmett was at the police car, that's when he had Walter's phone, and that's when Walter's phone started blowing up with calls. So
Okay.
that would make sense that he'd scheduled that post because it wasn't ringing. I don't think there were signs of it ringing before Emmett got to the police car.
That around that time I had made a post. I had took a picture of her and her kids and they were in front of the courthouse. And then Walter had followed her there and she had called me and she's like, take that picture down. Walter followed us to the courthouse. We're at the police station now. Don't post anything and block him. So yeah, I've had him blocked since then. That was before he killed Missy. The only time I seen the post that he made is because somebody sent it to me the day my mom called and said that she was dead. I go back to my brain and say, I wish Missy went to ask me to block him because I would have seen that. I would have blew her up. I would have said, hey, don't, you gotta leave, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe I wouldn't have seen it because in my brain, I truly believe that he had to have scheduled that. He's not a dummy. He's a fucking internet wizard.
Well, plus as well, it was all planned
Yes.
from from
And
what
he
I've
wanted the
seen.
attention. He got the attention he wanted, which was everyone saying, no, Walter, don't do it. I don't know why he wanted that attention after being dead. He wanted the last words where
Yep,
he
yep,
backed Missy and said, she's fucking useless.
yep. That's exactly it. It's the narc control. It's just absolutely the narcissist needing to have the last word and having the control. So, do you remember the months before it happened? Does anything stand out in your head? Because I know that I've shared about him, his suicide attempt. They went to
Well,
counseling,
then
court orders.
I was in Florida from January and she died April 25th. So it was me. I'm living in Wausau. I'm going to CNA school. My uncle's in the midst of dying. He tells me like 9 months prior, hey, Shelly, I got lung cancer. I am going to die. It's a guarantee. So then I started driving every day from Wausau to his house in Okano, which is like 2 hours. And I started driving every day that I didn't have to work. When my uncle died, Missy came to that celebration of life and she stayed extensively long. Like she did not want to go home. Like with her kids, she's very persistent on we're at home by 6. They have a snack. They go to bed. Shelly, no, we can't do that. They need to go to bed. But like those two events, she stayed very long, way past 7. Like she didn't want to go home. So I knew there was something wrong. So then she's living in Green Bay. I'm living in Wausau. My uncle dies. I go crazy. I'm like, I'm not finishing school. I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm moving. I'm not staying here. And Missy's like, oh, I live in Green Bay. You can come stay here. You can be like our built at home nanny. And she's laughing about it. And she's like, no, I could really use your help. You could stay here. So then that was the plan. I had everything at my house still because I paid my rent for like a couple months ahead of time. So I was just gonna start staying at her house and because I quit my job. Yeah, my uncle died, I quit my job. So then I'm like, oh, I have nothing to do in Wausau. I want to get the hell out of here. So then Missy's like, oh, you can come back here and hang out with us. So then I do. I get it all lined up where I can start bartending at a job that I used to work at, which is like blocks away from Missy's house. And then like I remember I was in Green Bay and I'm like, oh, can I have your keys so I can go there and shower? And she was like irritated and she's like, I'm just frustrated today. She was like angry with me. And then I remember pulling up to her house and she's on the phone with Walter talking about how like I was inconveniencing her and she was bothered. So I'm like, well, fuck you too. I'm never coming back, blah, blah, blah. You're the one who said I could come. And like I stopped talking to her then. I knew then Walter had control of her because then like 2 weeks later, she made a post saying, Emmett's so happy, Papa's moving back home, blah, blah, blah. So as soon as Walter knew I was gonna move in, he fucking moved back in with Missy.
Yeah.
So I knew he had control over it then. January 15th, I'm like, oh, Missy, I'm going to Florida. So nice knowing you. I don't need to live with you, blah, blah, blah. And like, it was getting closer to me going on the flight. And she was like, I got the Facebook memories that pop up because she's commenting on my thing. And she's like, we'll pay for you to not go, blah, blah. You could be our stay at home nanny. And she's laughing about it. And I knew she had to be kidding because Walter was living with her at the time. She's like, what can we do for you not to go? So I feel bad about that. But she never literally said, hey, Shelly, I need your help.
I know that you probably have a lot of guilt, but there's absolutely nothing that you could have done at all to prevent what he did because no one would have expected him to do what he did. But I know as a sister, I would feel the same with my sister.
Yeah, I wish she was just said, like, could you not go back? So then I come back March 19th. I see her. She's like, oh, I'm living at the Golden House. And I'm like, I literally said to her, why are you living there? Do you think Walter's going to kill you? And she shrugged her shoulders. And I'm like, Missy, are you okay? And she's like, we'll be fine. We're fine. Shelly, we're fine. That's all she's ever told me. It's we're fine. We'll be fine. I just wish she would have literally said, like, I need help. But it's my fault because I shouldn't have had to wait for her to say that.
Well, the thing is that I don't know whether you would have been able to help. She was doing everything she could have. She went to the courts, she went to the police, she went to Golden House. I don't know whether you being there would have helped. I think that something might have happened to you as well. It sounds like he escalated so much in his behaviors that I don't think there was a way to stop him.
In my brain, I'm not saying I'm a genius or Walter ever thought about me, but like in my brain, it has something to do with when I talked to Walter's brother, and this is Walter's way of getting back at me. But everybody says no, that's not true. It's like deeper than that, which obviously it could be, but like I blame myself for that too. I was in Florida, was the happiest I've ever been in my whole life, and then 5 days before my birthday, like it's weird because I was living on a houseboat. So I woke up like we're in a different time zone in Florida. So I was like 2 hours. I don't remember if I was 2 hours before or 2 hours after. I don't remember anything anymore. But I literally woke up and the lady I was living with, which was my friend, and I'm like, hey, Alyssa, we should go. We should get up. We should go to land. And I smoked cigarettes at the time. I quit smoking cigarettes since Missy died, but I was like up, awake. It's like 90 degrees. It was like 7 a.m. And I'm like, we should get up. We should go to land. We should do all this. We should go shopping. We should do this, this, and this. And I'm like, dude, we should get Missy. I literally was saying this stuff to Alyssa before my mom called me to say Missy's dead. And I'm up awake on the boat saying, we should get Missy these eyebrow stencils because she must have just, oh, she had just posted that picture of her saying, happiest I've ever been in my, or she had posted that picture like 2 days before she died, that black and white picture. And then when I commented and said, you look happy, and she's responded with, happiest I've been in years. And her eyebrows were like halfway drawn on. She really sucked at it. So I'm like awake telling Alyssa, I'm like, we should go to land. We should do this. We need to do this. And we should get Missy these eyebrow stencils and we should mail them to her. And she's like, yeah, we could. And then my phone rings and Alyssa's like, yo, your phone's ringing. And I'm like, well, it's like 6 o'clock in Green Bay. Like, who would be calling? And then I grab my phone, it's my mom, and I'm like, oh, it's my mom. I call her back. She don't answer. I read the text, says it's an emergency. I call my mom back. She says Missy's bad. So that was weird. Like I woke up talking about Missy. Like I remember I woke up with like a huge burst of energy and I couldn't go back to sleep. Like I remember thinking, oh, Alyssa's gonna be mad because I'm about to wake her up, but there's no way I can go back to sleep right now. And then within like 20 minutes of being awake, my mom's calling me to say Missy's dead.
When she moved back into her home after Golden House, did she tell you about that?
She said we're back home because I texted her, I feel terrible, but from the time I came, March 19th, I came for 10 days, which means I would have left on the 29th. I would have went back. So then for like 27 days, I would have been back in Florida. That she would have been alive from the last time I seen her. For like 27 days, she would have been living. And I probably texted her like 3 times, maybe 4 times. And the last time I texted her, I was mad at her because I asked her if she could go to Wausau and get my security deposit check. And she's like, yeah, but on my own time because I got a lot going on, blah, blah. And there I go again, being insecure and only care about myself. So I was mad at her. Like the last messages I have with Missy, she's like, in the nicest way possible, I did you a favor. Could you give me a break? And I never wrote her back. So the next time I looked at like my messages with her, she was dead. So I talked to her like 3 times in 20 some days. I seen her on Facebook and I would comment on that stuff. And she's like, oh, we're back home for the Easter egg hunt. Wisconsin sucks because it's like cold here. Florida is obviously very warm. I don't know. I told myself at the very least, since I couldn't help Missy or see that she needed help, at the very least, I could help Emmett and Avante because I don't think, like, I don't have kids. So I know Missy probably is like, yeah, thank God mom's taking care of my kids and not Shelly because I don't have kids. But I do know that Emmett and Avante look forward to coming here, like, because they come here like 2 to 3 times a week and they do look forward to coming here every time. So I would just feel bad if I still lived in Florida.
Speaking of the boys, when you were living near her, did she let you babysit them at all?
No, not like she's weird. No, she didn't. That's why I feel guilty when they're here. That's why I feel guilty when I'm driving them around. I'm like, so like I tell my mom every chance she can drop them off, do because I hate being in the car with them alone. She's like, no, Shelly, they can't get in your car. You used to smoke cigarettes in your car. My kids are smoke-free environment. They don't get in your car. No, we don't do that. She's very overprotective. Like, but for years she didn't let my mom watch them either.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I don't think it was because of you. I think that that was because she knew that, well, the only reason that your mum found out what was going on is because of Emmett and what Emmett said. So I think that she, or maybe Walter was telling her that you guys couldn't look after the kids because you'd find out what was really going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense because I used to always be like, Missy, if you need a break. And she's like, no, I don't. But you could like literally see it in her face that she needed a break. All she wanted was a break, but she wouldn't let it happen ever.
And I know that after Emmett said something, that was the last time that your mum babysat him, and was able to do it with Avante, but Avante wasn't talking. So that's the only reason that he was allowed to be with her. That, I mean, that's just, yeah, it makes sense that she was trying so hard to show you guys that everything was fine when it wasn't.
Yeah, I wish she would have did that. Like, well, she went to school for psychology. Like, she's not dumb. I don't know where her logic came with that.
I think it comes from years of being controlled by him. I think that she probably felt like you guys wouldn't believe her because that's what he would have told her. Or she didn't want to worry you, it seems like, as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything about that day that you want to talk about, or anything before leading up to it that you think that has been missed that you think needs to be said?
Um,
Like, did
One of
you
the last times I talked to Missy, she said, I can't help you because I need to focus on Walter. He wants to commit suicide. And I was mad at her for that. And that was one of the last times I ever talked to her. And then the day she died, no, my mom called me and told me. And then I'd booked a plane ticket like a week later. Like I had my ticket booked for like that week later. I was in Florida for like 5 days after Missy died, and I just literally didn't move and cried for like 5 days straight. I did a stupid news interview twice in Florida, and then I did the one when I came back. I went to the news in person and did that interview because they kept asking me why I was going back. Like that last lady was like, "Well, what do you want us to say?" In which I just wanted the news to say that Walter murdered Missy because at first it kind of seemed that like they beat each other up and killed each other, and I was so mad about it. So like the last news thing that I did do, she highlighted the um death report I gave her, and it said homicide by other, which then they said Walter Gray murdered Missy on the news, which made me happy. That was literally the only thing I wanted. I don't know why, but I feel like I needed that.
Yeah. So speaking of the media, were they sort of hounding you guys after it happened to say something?
I don't know if they hit my mom up or if she doesn't know, but I didn't reach out to them. They started blowing me up, and it might be because of all the stuff I was posting. Because like I was like going crazy on Facebook, posting everything I possibly could. So like 3 different news people had hit me up. So my mom said that you said my dad's case was being used in like a law thing. Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
what did you mean by that?
it was during our interview, and I was just Googling to check something, and I found that it's being used in case text.
I did write him when I was a kid. I wrote him prison letters. I wish I still had them so you could include them in your video, but like 5 years ago or something, I burned them in a fire outside because I felt like they were haunting me because he drew a picture of my dad and it freaked me
Oh,
out and sent it back to me.
oh,
So I burned all of his letters and everything else. But yeah, I did write him, and he did write back like a million letters. Well, at least 6 of them, front to back pages,
did he apologize at all?
over and over, saying like, "Well, I didn't mean for it to be your dad." Like I was 13 when I was reading those letters, so sometimes I wish I didn't burn them and I would have read them again, so I
Yeah,
could take it for what it was now. But they used to like I would carry them around in this envelope, and it used to freak me out. So yeah, they had to be burned, but over and over he had apologized, but he really wasn't sorry. More or less, he sent Bible scriptures. He drew that picture of my dad, and it
always
had,
do that.
yeah, it had Bible scriptures all over it.
I know that he was released at the beginning of last year. How do you feel
Yeah.
about that?
Well, that was my reason for going to Florida. I'm like, I'm getting the fuck out of here because I'm like, my whole life, my uncle's like, don't worry about Todd. I'm gonna kill him. And then my uncle dies. That was my whole reason running away to Florida is because Todd was released. And
Yeah.
now that son of a bitch, like it pisses me off that he gets to see Missy dying on the news, but he's free. That really bothers me.
Yeah, absolutely. He hasn't tried to reach out to any of you, has he?
No,
Good.
yeah, I don't think he. Yeah, well, I think I know he has a no contact.
Yeah. I think it's like a lifelong one that they like.
Yeah, and I know he's still on papers. I know exactly where he lives actually.
That's
This is
sweet.
my yeah. I've been looking for answers my whole life of why.
Of
So I'd
why?
like to know like what their well, I finally got like I was living in Wausau and my uncle was dying. My uncle's girlfriend decided to tell me that Todd had built up animosity towards my dad, and like weeks before, my dad's like, "We're done hanging out with him, Carol. We're not. That's his girlfriend, my dad's girlfriend. We're not hanging out with Todd no more, Carol. We need new friends." And then Carol's like, "Yep, that's true, Shelly. We didn't hang out with him for weeks." And then your dad's like, "Let's go to Todd's and have a party." And that was the day. So Todd had this built up animosity, they admit to me 16 years later. Like my whole life, I'm like, why'd he kill him though? That was his friend. Why'd he kill him? I want to know. And everyone's like, "Oh, Todd's crazy, blah, blah, blah." But now, 16 years later, they were like, he had built up animosity over my dad. My dad was a mechanic, over my dad not fixing his bike in time for he's like, "I need to go to work, Scott." And my dad's like, "Hey, I got real cars to fix. I'll get to your bike when I get a chance." I got a whole book of I was obsessed with my dad dying. So I got like a lot of news articles and from the newspaper, And I got a lot of stuff that I downloaded on Google, but I haven't looked at it since I was a kid. And when I recently looked at it, it's like I Googled man stabbed with fork on East Mason Street. And that's what I kept Googling. And then I get away from that because all the shitty ass comments that are on Google where people are commenting and laughing and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I just sent you Todd's appeal being denied.
Yeah, we've gotten those a million times because my dad's girlfriend actually, like all of 16 years that Todd was in jail, she kept her address updated. So she got a letter every time from the DA, every time like Todd would breathe or think about even breathing. They'd send her a letter and be like, hey, Todd's doing this. Hey, Todd's doing this. Hey, Todd wants his to appeal. Hey, Todd wants his journals back out of evidence. They sent her all those letters. So I do know most of that stuff.
And she can't tell you, she doesn't really know a why, just the animosity had built up.
Yeah, that's what she says. Built up animosity. He wanted to kill my dad. I feel like he had these journals. I don't know how much you looked into his life, but he had these journals, and he used to go to like this Mexican store, which is in Green Bay, and that's what they called it. It's called like El Ranchito, but the whole town knows it as a Mexican store, and he'd buy like these gruesome murder, like magazines, and they were like people over countries, different countries being murdered, and they're like gruesome graphic pictures of these. And I don't know why they sold them at this fucking convenience store, but they did. And then he'd take like black mesh journals, the ones that say like the journal on them with name on the front of them. And then he would like cut out these and write his own like scripture of what was going on in the picture. And he had like a million of those journals. And my whole life as a kid, my dad's like, don't look in those journals. Todd's a weirdo. Don't look in those journals. Todd's a weirdo. He definitely wanted to be famous for killing somebody.
That's where we leave off with Shelly, who still has a lot of questions to the murders of her sister and her father. Scott's girlfriend Carol has remained close with his children after his death. Carol wanted to share something in this video, and I'll play that now.
Yeah, so it was like 1 week before Missy died. She called me and asked if she could stop in and visit with the kids. I remember it being a Saturday, and I told her she was always welcomed. Um, I remember I saw her pull into my driveway, and I met her at my front door. And she quickly unbuckled the kids and brought them inside my house. I remember thinking, like, what was her hurry? Maybe Emmett or Avante had to use the bathroom, but that wasn't the case, and I did not question her about it. We talked in my living room while the boys played, and she told me that she was living at the Golden House, but that it wasn't working for her anymore. She said that she would drive the kids around for hours so they would settle down until she could put them to sleep, bring them to restaurants or certain venues so they would get tired. Missy told me that every place or every time she looked for help or every 800 number she called, she said it was just a joke. Them were her words. And I told her that she must feel all alone and it must get lonely. And I remember her saying, yeah, it sure does, Carol. It sure does get lonely. So at that point, I left the living room and I was in another part of my house when I heard someone knocking on my front door. And I came to see who it was. I walked into my living room and I saw Missy peeking out my side window, hiding behind my curtains. She was sweating and holding her hand to her chest. She was scared and having a panic attack. I had never seen her like that before. I asked her what was wrong. She said that she thought it was Walter that had followed her to my house. But once she peeked out the window, she realized it was my sister and her boyfriend. So she let them in. When we were alone again, I asked her why she was so scared. And she told me that she thought Walter had followed her to my house. I mean, she was terrified. And when she had to leave, she didn't want to walk outside alone with the kids. So she asked if she could have the guys walk her out. Missy was so scared and terrified, and I know why now. I saw her the day before she was murdered. She stopped by my house to drop some things off, and she just met me at the front door. I invited her in, but she didn't come in because the kids were sleeping in the car. She told me she had to get home, and that was when I realized that she went home to her apartment, not the Golden House. And that was the last time I seen her. She was deceased the next morning.
On April 25th, it will be 1 year since Missy's death. I want to thank the family and friends of Missy for allowing me to tell Missy's story, especially Cindy and Shelly. If you could please leave them some comments below, that would be wonderful. Until next time, bye for now.